But when you grow your business and keep having more income coming in and get more business assets, you don't really know what it's going to become, but there's much more potential there. So that's I would say that's a challenge I have right now. It's a good challenge to have.
Are you ready to take the next step in your multifamily investing career? The time has never been better than now. Think Multifamily's Deal Analysis Workshop is a comprehensive live training course that will help increase your skills, knowledge, confidence as an investor before you invest. This workshop is a unique experience that provides hands-on instruction and guidance directly from Mark Kenney, who has completed over 100 multifamily syndications valued at over $1 billion. This course goes beyond theory, as you will be presented with real case studies and practice scenarios to work out in class. By the end of the training, you will have significantly improved your ability to evaluate deals quickly, make informed decisions, and take your investing skills to the next level with confidence. For more information and to register for Think Multifamily's Deal Analysis Workshop, go to thinkmultifamily.com/DAW. Use code Whitney100 to save $100. The Deal Analysis Workshop is designed for both beginner and experienced investors. Whether you are looking for a foundational understanding of how to analyze multifamily investments or looking for fresh insight on how to pivot your analysis method for this current market cycle, this is a workshop you have been looking for. Register today at thinkmultifamily.com/DAW. Use code Whitney100 to save $100. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. However, today, I don't feel like much of a host. It was quite a surprise what the guest had in store for the show today. A friend of mine, Taylor Loht. He's a real estate investor. He's focused on multifamily, self-storage investments. He shares his knowledge with expert real estate investors on his podcast, and it's called the Passive Wealth Strategy Show. Today, Taylor has acquired, partnered, invested on, otherwise had handed over $150 million in commercial real estate. I've known Taylor for a number of years now, and you're going to hear parts of that story. Again, he had a different take on what we were going to do today than I expected, and I was definitely honored and humbled by what he had to share, and I hope that it is helpful for you today. I love watching people in this business going out there and making it happen. Our guest today, I've known for a number of years now, and he is doing just that. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Whitney. It's great to reconnect with you and excited to speak with your listeners as well.
Yeah, honored to have you on the show. Again, I've known Taylor, I don't know how many years now, and we've connected years ago, different conferences and together. And so it's just been incredible to see the growth. Taylor, give our listeners an update. What's happening with you? You're focused in real estate right now. Maybe give us some details how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Taylor Loht, I'm a real estate investor based in Richmond, Virginia. We invest all throughout the Sun Belt and a little bit in the Midwest, multifamily and self-storage primarily. And it's been a growth process. We've grown over time. As you alluded to, you and I originally met, I think it was 2017 or 18. Honestly, I don't remember the exact date, but I had been working on my syndication business for a little while then, but honestly, kind of spinning my wheels. I wasn't making the progress that I really wanted to. And there were a lot of reasons for that, but you joined the same coaching program that I was in, and you're in Roanoke. I'm in Richmond. You were coming to Richmond. It said, hey, let's sit down. So you and I met up at a coffee shop, as I recall. Again, this is many years ago, and originally connected. And I thought, hey, it's an interesting guy, and, we'll see where it goes, and kind of, left it at that. And here we stand years later, 2023, you've grown considerably over those years. And, my business has naturally grown as well. And I think in many ways, my growth, I can directly attribute to lessons that I learned by watching you. And I mentioned this, that I might want to talk about this on your show before we started recording here, but I'd love to go through lessons that I learned by watching you succeed. You specifically, Whitney Sewell, succeed in the real estate syndication business. And by watching you, watching your business, but also having numerous conversations and dinners with you over the years and attending conferences together, especially early on when, we were both kind of getting started and trying to save a little bit of money, that kind of thing, attending conferences. So yeah, I'd love to go through some of those lessons, if you don't mind, that I've learned by watching.
I told you, it's definitely not, you don't have to do that, but I am honored and very grateful. I'm thankful that I could help you in some way. Taylor, but I'm honored. Yeah, let's discuss some of those things. And I think it's going to help many others, but I hope it does. And I would preface this, and you and I talked about this too. It's like, whatever you say, I guarantee I learned it from somebody else or watched somebody else do it. Right. But yeah, let's talk about it.
That's fair. That's fair. And, we were texting a little bit earlier before we got on the call, and I said, I want to tell your listeners how great you are. And I don't know if you thought I was serious about that, but I'm honest. And you're such a humble guy. I honestly would not be surprised if you didn't want to air this episode because you're so humble. And, I'm about to give you a lot of compliments. So,
well, I appreciate that.
So first off, I think the number one, and again, this is something that you hear a lot in the real estate space, but you're a great example of it, is number one, know your why. And I think anybody who's gotten to know you and your business and why you're a real estate investor, your mission surrounding adoptions and supporting adoptions, you have a crystal clear why. You did from day one. And it's really, from what I can tell, and watching you and watching your business, I think you have kept that goal, right in front of you, whether it's with your own children or with supporting others. And I think that has clearly helped you push through the tough times, right? Because we all have tough times in our businesses. So that's probably the biggest one. And, it's not something that you invented, of course, but I think it's something that you've been more mindful of and more deliberate about than a lot of people.
I appreciate that. And I don't think I've ever shared this before, Taylor, but for some reason it just hit me. So I had a business. Actually, most people have heard now about the horse training business I had, right? When we first started that business, I felt led to donate half our profits then, and I didn't do it. And so, when we started the real estate business, I thought, you know what? We're just going to commit, and we're going to put it right out there. So we have to be committed to it, and I'm so thankful we did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So honestly, I had forgotten about the horse training business, but when we originally met, I think you still had the farm. You were kind of winding it down, trying to get your capital out of it so you'd have capital ready to deploy into all the multifamily deals you, again, have wound up doing. But at the time, it was still ahead of you, right? That was a great one. Next big lesson that I learned from you, and these are a little bit out of order, folks. If you're watching the video, you can see I've got a notepad here because I've been thinking about these things since I, booked the interview. So number two is commit to the process. And that goes along the lines of, leading your horse training business and all the other moves that you made. You are really seriously committed to your real estate syndication business. And if I recall correctly as well, I think you also sold the house that you lived in to buy a duplex. It's been several years since this happened, but do I remember that correctly?
Depends on how long ago you're talking about. I'm trying to think where in this story you'd be talking about that. But yes, we sold the house to be committed, right? And then we moved in. We had to rent a little house in town for 6 months. Then we bought a little house and we did sell that as well. So yeah, we've done a bunch of moving to make it happen.
So that's huge, right? You are really committed to the business and you put your money where your mouth is. Another big one, and I think the last time you and I sat down to dinner, and that was probably just a few months before COVID, if I'm remembering correctly. It might have been even January before COVID really hit back in 2020 when we last sat down to dinner. But the last conversation that we had about it was about the teams that you were building. And we've had several conversations over the years about your employment of virtual assistants and executive assistants in your business. That's something that you did super, super early on when, again, we were attending those conferences together and, you're starting to build your brand. I think one of the conferences we went to in 2018 or something, you were getting business cards from folks that you were meeting at the conference, taking pictures of them and sending them to your virtual assistant, who was then digitizing them and everything. And at that time, again, if I recall correctly, you were starting to work on the launch of this very podcast that we're on today and telling me about, you're doing a daily podcast. I thought, man, that is quite the commitment. One of the reasons that you were able to do that and have been able to do that up until now was the teams that you were building very early on, and you were valuing your time properly and building a team around it to accomplish those goals. And especially in the beginning, in any business, but real estate syndication space, before you have a deal, before you have cash flow coming in, that can be an enormous financial commitment. And I don't want to get too into the specifics of what I may or may not remember, but what I remember is the amount that you were investing in your business to build this show and get deals going and everything was colossal. It was a big, big commitment on a monthly basis. And you were really betting on being able to find deals and make it work.
Yeah, it was a massive commitment. It's interesting you bring that up. I'm thinking back about, when you and I were going to those conferences and stuff. And we did start the podcast we did launch it, I think in August of 18. And I was building those teams through virtual assistants. I knew that I could not edit the audio, video, do all those things that we all know you have to do for the podcast, right? But doing a daily show, I knew it wasn't possible for me to do it. And it just wasn't even a thought, right? It wasn't going to get done, but it was a massive commitment. And I was thinking about you talking about us going to conferences together. Yeah, during that time, you and I were sharing rooms too. We were going to conferences, and I mean that was during a time too, and even going into beginning of that next year, or probably a lot of 19, where my wife and I, we didn't know how we were going to produce a show. Many months we would be talking about, we weren't sure how we were going to afford to do it the next month, and so I can remember back to that time when you and I were traveling some together, and thinking back, man. That was a pretty stressful time for me, but I could not have done it if I hadn't have been very proactive early on in hiring people. Couldn't have done it.
And that's something that I think, in applying this lesson to my own business, not to turn it about to myself, but that has helped me kind of get out of the weeds of the production of my own podcast, building of my own brand and everything like that, is hiring people, outsourcing, remembering the value of my time, or valuing my time more highly, seeing where I can outsource to others so that I can focus on the highest dollar per hour, tasks in my business. And I learned that from watching you. And like you said, it's something that you invented. You didn't invent hiring teams. I'm just saying, from my personal perspective, you were the best example, I think, that I personally got to witness growing, a business like this. And it really worked out. So yeah, that's another big one. And again, we've had several conversations about that. Another one, taking deliberate action quickly. Something that I watched you do early on. You were building your teams, but you weren't holding off on doing these things. You were continually implementing and doing these things quickly, whether it was building your podcast, getting a show going, making it happen. You weren't putting things off and saying, I'll get the podcast started, whatever. Next year, I'm going to get ready for January and keep pushing it off. Once you had the idea, you kept pushing forward and making it happen. And that led to doing deals and growing. And I think the speed of implementation, again, as you would probably say, it's not an idea that you implemented. I'm just saying that I got to watch you do it. And that's helped inspire me to take action more quickly and to remember to do that on a more granular basis. Whenever I have something I'm considering implementing in my business, an example like you and watching you helps inspire me to take that action more quickly, or be more decisive about whether it's something that I want to apply in my business. And if I do, then I better do it quickly to figure out if it works or not. And I think you're very good at that.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like I'm not very good at that. But I do remember times, and still even now, but especially early on, where, I'm asked to do something. Like, I remember the first time somebody asked me to speak at our local meetup, and I'd been going there for probably a year. That's before I really even knew about syndication, right? And then all of a sudden, it was probably right before you and I met, or somewhere in there, and they asked me to speak. And I remember, the anxiety, right? What? Why do you want me to speak? But, I'd been started reading more, and I remember thinking, oh no, I got to just commit to do it. I know it's probably going to be painful, but I'm so thankful, that I did. And I can look at other scenarios, the same thing, or look at other people, right, too, that doing exactly what you're talking about. So I appreciate that. I still feel like I don't implement fast enough. And I feel like even that is a kind of an up and down cycle. I feel like I go through times where I'm implementing really well, and other times where I'm not, and I have to keep kicking my own self in gear.
Well, it's a practice, really. It's something that you need to do consistently. It's a habit, it's practice, however you want to put it. But I'm sure, we all need our own reminders about those things. So yeah, that's huge. Another big one that I've always been amazed by, especially early on when we were attending a few of those conferences together. We went to Ultimate Partnering in Boston, and I think we did Michael Blanc's and there might have been another one in there somewhere, but I've seen you talk to, especially early on, this is before you had done a real estate syndication deal, especially. So early, I want to try to set the picture for the listeners here. Before you've done a deal, you spent basically all your time in the hallway, which is the place to be if you're at a real estate syndication event. The sessions are fine, but kind of don't waste your time in there. Spend your time in the hallway getting to know others. But I watch you have many conversations with a lot of people who you didn't know. And there are a few big takeaways that I got from watching that and also speaking with you about it, about your technique, quote unquote. But you're very good at building a genuine connection with people so that when they walk away, they feel like they know you, but you didn't spend the whole time talking, right? You probably didn't say very much at all. You let them spend most of the time talking. And you're also very good at being 100% engaged with the person who is standing right in front of you. Even though there's all this chaos going on around you in the hall, you are laser focused. And again, we've talked about this before. I asked you about that. Again, this is years ago. But I remember you saying maybe it was from having been a cop in your previous life when you had to be 100% involved in that. But that's something that you're very good at, and I watched you be really good at early on.
I appreciate that. Maybe some of that does come from the cop days, no doubt about it. But I remember like working on that specific thing, and I also remember during that time, I remember going to the first BP event at. I don't know if it was best ever, had to be best ever, I guess. One of the best ever events early on, or very early on, maybe even been that year. And watching our mentor, Joe Fairless, watching him in there, right? And doing that exact thing. And I remember thinking that like, wow, like there's so many people that want to talk to him, but he will stand and talk to this person as long as they want to talk to him. Right. And it's like, yeah, he's got blinders on. He is very focused on what they are saying. And I think that says so much about him. Like there's so many people that want to talk to him. Right. And so even at that time, I just thought, hey, I know that's valuable. It's putting value right into that, in that person, right. And what they're saying. And if you are distracted, it's obvious, right? If that person's speaking to you. And so I wanted to work on that more and more. It's interesting that stood out to you because I hope that I've done a good job at that, because you do. It's after speaking to so many people at conferences and back to back to back, it gets hard to remember, right? Different things about people. But I do feel like it helps me if I am like really trying to focus on what you're saying, right? Versus trying to speak myself. Right. And we all want to talk about ourselves. No doubt about it. I try to steer away from that. Right. You're not helping me today, by the way. But, but it's been so helpful. Right. And I just think, it helps so much to learn more as much as you can about that individual because you may only have 5 minutes, with them or 10 minutes at the most sometimes.
Yeah. And I've had hundreds of maybe thousands of those types of conversations myself at real estate conferences. And I've, watched a lot of those conversations as well. And I think, from getting to know you, you're probably one of the best at it that I've had the opportunity to witness and learn from. And, we all learn from somebody, right? And you're 100% right about Joe's level of engagement when he's speaking with someone face to face. He's 100% there. Honestly, for me, it's hard to imagine that. I have to think of specific experiences, especially watching you, how laser focused, the horse blinders, that you have on. It's really something. And, for the listeners out there, if you're speaking with people at conferences, even the little subtle things people notice that you're disengaging a little bit. And Whitney doesn't have those little subtle things, right? You are 100% there, making eye contact, listening, engaging, asking questions, learning about somebody. And then to go back to the business cards, digitizing them and everything, you go back, you take notes, you file them in your CRM, and you take that information moving forward, and you're actually engaged and listening. And I'm sure, now you have folks, things have changed over time. You've got so much volume now. Don't spend, quite as much time doing this. But it was a great lesson. And I think being 100% engaged in those situations can help you build a better connection, right? The more we connect with people, the better it is for everybody. We all want to feel heard and acknowledged. And of course, if you're out looking to meet potential investors or potential partners, you want to be engaged with those people and get to know them.
That's right. No doubt about it. I'll share a quick tip there around that. During that time, I'll never forget. I mean, you and I both, just go to as many conferences as I possibly could, talk to as many people. I'd just talk to anybody. It didn't matter, anybody that would talk to me, I'd talk to them.
You got to do what you got to do.
I would take these business cards, right? And sometimes, let's say I'd talk to a number of people I'd go to the bathroom and I'd start writing down on these cards anything I could remember about these people, because I knew I'd forget, right? By the next day, you've talked to so many people, but I'd start writing down some key things that I knew I needed to remember on those cards. But then I got a little more sophisticated and I started Voxering. Voxer is a walkie-talkie app that, a lot of people use now, but it's been helpful in our team and using VAs and how, ways to communicate. But I would Voxer sometimes myself, but just so it's recorded, or a Voxer or a VA, like you talked about, those details, so I can just like dump them right there. Right. And then I know they're in the CRM, hopefully a VA or somebody's putting them in there. Right. Whitney talked to Taylor, whoever it was, at this conference, and this is some of the high level things that they talked about. And so then when I follow up with that person, well, I can kind of refresh my memory. Even if I can't remember everything, maybe I noted that they have 2 kids and they love to go skiing. Well, that's just something that I can bring up right during our conversation. And so it's like, they realize then that, hey, he did pay attention to what I was saying, right? I mean, I had to go through a few steps to make that happen, but no, that's, so important.
Yeah, I remember, again, early on, I think it was all Ultimate Partnering that we attended together. I remember you getting all those business cards and sitting on your bed in the hotel room at night. Again, this is really early on. We were, we hadn't done anything and we're trying to keep our costs super low. And I remember seeing you taking pictures of them and sending them to your VA really early on. And that was awesome. Another big one, and this one might sound obvious or maybe not obvious, maybe a little ridiculous, but I think in the syndication space, there are a lot of people out there trying to tell you how easy it is. Oh man, there's so much money out there. You're going to do great. You're not even going to really have to work for it. But you're a great example of just working super hard. I mean, that might sound a little silly, but when you see someone work as hard as you do, and especially as hard as you did early on when you were really committed to the process. And I'll give a specific example of what I mean by that is, again, one of these conferences, I think it was probably Ultimate Partnering, you would be, I'm sure, the first in the hall. You would be up the earliest. Maybe this goes back to, being a cop. I don't know, but you would be right there early on and you'd be basically the last guy to leave, spending as much time and as much energy as you could building connections with people. And I know, again, from conversations that we've had since then and, over time, just the amount of time and work that you put into producing your podcast, doing your deals and everything, a lot of long days, late nights, spending so much time on planes, flying to see deals, going to, mastermind events and, what have you, is you were really committed to putting in as many hours as you could. This is from my perspective watching you, but you just work super hard. I mean, there's no substitute for it. You just did it. And I think our listeners should be aware that you got to work really hard to make it work in this business.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I like to think that I worked really hard, but not to say I'm sure there's people that worked a lot harder than I have. But I think during that time too, when you and I were traveling a lot and going to conferences, I saw that as a time, obviously away from the family too, and like I want to use that time at the best I possibly could, while my wife is at home holding the whole fort down, right, and the kids and working super hard, like. I felt guilty if I was out partying, right? Or, like just doing something like that. Like, no, I feel like, hey, I'm working too. It's a reason I'm traveling. It's, it's the family's money that's, right. It's sending me there, right? We're doing this as a family unit. And I just felt like, hey, I need to maximize as many minutes during the day as I possibly could and not blow the money, right? But be as wise as I could, not only with the money, but with my time. And so it does take a lot of hard work. I think you want to do anything and be good at it. You're going to have to put the time in. Somebody's got to put the time in, or you got to pay somebody to put the time in, right? I mean, one or the other. The time has been put in by somebody. You either have the money to pay that person or you got to go put the time in yourself. And I didn't have the money to pay anybody.
And then even paying somebody, you still invest or spend the time working on higher dollar per hour activities. You're still putting time in. And that goes back to just your response to that comment. That goes back to knowing your why. You knew why you were there. You knew what the investment was that you were making of your entire family's resources and time, and your wife and the commitment and everything involved around it. And you didn't waste it. And I was thinking about this as well before we got on here. I love coffee. I don't even know if you drink coffee. I'm quite certain I've never seen you drink coffee. but just to have the amount of energy that you've always had at these events and not be slugging down coffee like I do, is just mind blowing. I don't know.
That's interesting. You don't know if I drink coffee or not, too. That I do. I drink bulletproof coffee. If anybody knows what that is, yeah. Every morning I drink some coffee. I try to limit it, my intake, but I do. Yes.
Well, you're wise about it. I try to limit it as well. I can't have caffeine after 12, or I don't sleep. Yeah, I don't know. You're discreet about it, I guess.
No, I appreciate that, and I think too, it is a mindset of like, doing the podcast was the same way, doing 12 to 15 interviews a day, back to back to back. It's just, when hey, if somebody says this is what it takes to make this happen, something you're really trying to accomplish, I don't focus on how difficult it's going to be, right? That's just not helpful. I try to get my boys to do that now, right? It's like, well, they're complaining about something. I'm like, well, that's not going to help, right? Like, let's focus on the next step we need to take to get this thing done. And I think that's what had to happen, whether it was networking or the podcast or whatever it may be. It's like, what is the next step? Well, let's just look right there, for now.
I love it. Well, and I've got one more here that I think is huge. That, I don't have all the inside information about this, but it's something that I remember you telling me, especially after you had done a few deals. You had money coming in through acquisition fees and all the other ways that syndicators make money. And you told me that I think you're probably comfortable with me saying this is not that inside of information really, but you were reinvesting everything into your business. You weren't, at least at that point, you weren't taking money out of the business. Any income that you were getting from doing deals was purely, at least at that point, used to grow the business. And that's back, I think, when you had a day job and everything, and you were trying to hit that critical mass in your business to the point where you could, leave and do all the things that you wanted to do. But I think that's something for listeners to bear in mind, is if you really want to grow, keep reinvesting, keep committing, building new assets, finding new team members, what have you, continuing to grow and snowball your business. And that's probably the last big one that I have here. I'm sure if I sit and think about it, I'll come up with a few more. But those are keys that, if I'm honest with you, I think about probably on a daily basis in my business. And I felt a little uncomfortable in a certain sense wanting to talk to you about this on your show, because I thought maybe it would make you uncomfortable. But I want to publicly thank you for everything that I've learned by watching you. And I wanted to help see if I could, share any of those lessons with your listeners and just help them, grow their business from what I've learned by watching you grow and how I've been able to, implement and grow in my own business as well.
Wow. Taylor, I am humbled and honored that you would take the time to even write all that down. He did. He had a list of things or notes written down. And I'm grateful to have seen you then and us to have done those things together and grown. And I'll mention one thing on your last point there, I don't mind a bit you mentioning that, because it takes that. And I remember, it's probably been 3 years ago now. I even remember the guy that I can't think of his name, but I remember him well. This guy that said this, very experienced operator that I was interviewing. And he said one big mistake that people make when they're starting in this business, or almost in most businesses, right? But you finally make a little money and then they go spend it, right? Or they go buy that vehicle, or they go buy that house, or right. But they're still having to grind so hard because nothing changed in the business for them. They're still having to put in that 60, 80 plus hours a week, right? Instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to delay that gratification of buying that vehicle and I'm going to hire some help, right? And now not only, can you start changing the things that you're doing, right? You're not having to do the $10 hour tasks maybe anymore, right? You can start spending more time on the higher dollar tasks, which you should, because you hired that person, but you can start doing more, right, than you could before. And eventually, you're making more money than you did on that time, but I agree. And I mean, he said that it's a big mistake that many make. And I can't say I've done that perfectly by no means, but it took everything, early on to just survive, right, the business, and to think about that next hire, or to think about that next system or CRM or whatever it was that was going to be that investment, and I mean, I invest more now in, I was going to say software and mentorships, but that would like be many, many times what I used to make, annually, right? Just in what we spend now on those two things, or tech or in mentorships alone, or masterminds, things like that. But it's a neat progression. But you do have to be investing back, I think, not only just in the business, but in yourself, right? As well. And just a learning progression. But Taylor, I'm so grateful for your friendship, but just your humbleness, your humility as well. Just in bringing those things up and taking the time to really give back, right? In that way, you've done that today. I'm very grateful. I want to ask you. I feel like you've been interviewing me more than I've interviewed you, right? But I want to ask you a couple questions that I ask a lot of people. But what about as you've grown? What's outside of the lessons that you've learned from me? Anything else you would share that, hey, you know what, to the listener, this is something that helped me in a big way. To grow to where you're at today. When you and I were traveling around to where you're at today, what were a couple of key things? You know what? This is crucial.
Well, first off, I'll put the offer out there. If you want to travel again together, I will happily do that anytime. We don't need to be, we don't need to take that off the table. Just the amount that I learned, it's totally worth it. I'll even pay for the hotel room. No, I think probably the biggest one out of those, and these are huge lessons that have helped me in my business. Probably the biggest one for me that helped me grow my business was building teams and hiring people to handle things so that I could have hours back to focus on higher dollar per hour activities and more like strategic types of things, and really getting to get out and network more and build connections with people rather than edit a podcast myself or do social media posting or things along those lines. Hiring people to handle those things was a huge help for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. For sure. That's awesome. What about your best source for meeting new investors right now?
I'd say it's through my podcast. And my podcast is not, promotional. We try to keep it educational. I try to do my best job to be genuine and that is, I don't mean to puff myself up about that, but I try to, be who I am and be interested in the topics and have interesting people on. And if listeners resonate with that, if they want to speak with me, then, they take a step forward to have a conversation with me. And I think that's probably my best way to meet new investors.
What about maybe a recent challenge in your business and how you overcame that or how you are working on it?
Yeah, this is one that's on my mind, and it's a good challenge to have, if you will. But it's funny that you mentioned when we talked about reinvesting in your business, you mentioned, buying a car or whatever. And I'm a little bit in that position where I have a 2017. It's fine. It's a good car. It's in good shape. It's just got quite a few miles on it, but works fine. It's got all the bells and whistles and everything like that. But I want something nicer, and I'm happy with what I have, but we're, getting some income coming in from deals, things along those lines. And been a little tempted to buy a car, but I keep going back to that lesson that, I learned from you is, reinvest in the business, continue to grow. Don't get, tempted by the shiny object of a car. Cause at the end of the day, when you have that new car, it just eventually just becomes your car. But when you grow your business and keep having more income coming in and get more business assets, you don't really know what it's going to become, but there's much more potential there. So that's I would say that's a challenge I have right now. It's a good challenge to have. I don't mean to sound like a humble brag, but really the intent being remaining focused on the goal and not getting distracted by, I want a flashier car when I don't really need,
I understand. It is a challenge for everyone, right? What about some habits, Taylor, that you have that produce the highest return for you?
Good question. So in the fall, I did a program that some of your listeners may have heard of, 75 Hard. It's basically a challenge where high level, you work out twice a day, you have to drink a gallon of water, you have to read 10 pages of nonfiction. There's a few other things involved in there, but follow a diet program, things along those lines. And that really helped me. First off, it was pretty hard, and it's not physically hard quite as much as it is just kind of planning and remaining focused on your activities. But it really required me to granularly plan my day. And there were some really good lessons out of that. Also, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I'm in my 30s. So that means I'm basically always injured. So as a part of that program, I did a little bit of yoga at my house outside, and just doing that has helped as well, just to help me remain limber. But doing that program really helped me build more discipline and see what it was like when I planned my day that granularly, and carrying that forward has been a big help.
Wow, that's an accomplishment right there, or a commitment to say the least. Right, I've not done that, but it seems like a massive commitment.
It's tough. It is a commitment. It's more mentally harder than anything else. So really, the crappiest part was you have to take a 5-minute cold shower every day. That was my least favorite part. I didn't like the cold shower. I can work out twice a day, no problem. I could follow a diet program. That's fine. Have to stay, committed to it. Cold showers. I don't need to be doing those.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll pass on that as well. Taylor, how do you like to give back?
I support local animal shelters in my area. I make donations. They're much smaller donations than I'd like to be eventually. One of my goals is to continue to grow. And I've had conversations with business advisors on ways to, how should I think about incorporating that, giving back with my business and our profits and everything like that. And, it's another area where I watch you and watch what you do and, keep that in my mind as I, plan for the future. But animal shelters, that's important to me.
Awesome. You've also given back to me, I think, in a massive way today. I would say he did text me and say he's going to talk about something like that. And I just thought, whatever.
You didn't think I meant it.
Yeah, well, I didn't know it would be like this, or that, you took this kind of time. And I just thought, it's very thoughtful of you and to take time. I'm very grateful for that. And I hope it's been helpful to the listeners as well. Definitely all those things I can relate some kind of story to probably, or somebody else even that I've learned those things from. And I'm thankful that you've picked up some of those things and from me and from others. And no doubt about it, that we just kind of all learn from each other and keep moving forward. Taylor, very grateful again. And tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Sure. My company is NT Capital, ntcapitalgroup.com. Email Taylor at ntcapitalgroup.com. Love to speak with anybody. I love to share ideas. As you know very well, your network is your net worth. You learn the most by talking with people and building connections. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.